أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Seeking refuge and saying the Basmala. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The meaning of al-isti'adha is asking for refuge or protection. When the reader says أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, he is seeking the protection and refuge with Allah from Satan before starting to read. Allah in the Quran said in the chapter An-Nahl verse number 98, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. The translation of this verse is, and when you read the Quran, seek refuge with Allah from the rejected Satan. According to scholars, saying isti'adha is wajib. Now the rules of al-isti'adha. There are 6 rules. The first one is, if the reader is reciting silently or alone, he should seek refuge silently. The second one is, if one is about to pray, seeking refuge is also done silently. The third one is, if one is reading aloud and others are present that will hear the recitation, the seeking of refuge is done out loud. The fourth one is, if the reading is done by turns, as in a classroom situation, the first reader seeks refuge out loud and the rest do it silently. The fifth one is, if the reading is cut off by coughing, sneezing, or by talk referring to the reading or meaning of the verses, then there is no need for repeating the seeking of refuge. The sixth one and the last one is, if the reading is cut off by work or normal conversation or by eating, then the seeking of refuge should be repeated before beginning to read the Quran again. Now pay attention to the meaning and rules of Basmala. He who says Bismillah, he said Basmala. The proper way to say the Basmala is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It is necessary to read it before the beginning of every chapter or surah of the Quran, with the exception of At-Tawbah, which is also called Bara'ah. The reason of not saying the Basmala at the beginning of this chapter is generally agreed to be due to the content of the surah, which orders the Muslims to fight the non-believers. When the beginning to read the Quran with this chapter but not at the beginning of the surah, the reader then has the choice of saying the Basmala or not, after seeking the refuge with Allah from Satan. Now we will be learning ways of seeking refuge with the Basmala with the surah. If the reader wishes to start his reading at the beginning of a surah, he needs to seek refuge, say the Basmala and then recite the surah. There are 4 ways of doing this. Now, the terms are قطع الجميع, وصل الجميع, وصل البسملة بالسورة, وصل الاستعاذة البسملة. Now, the meanings and definitions of these terms. قطع الجميع, cutting all the 3 from each other. And it means seeking refuge, stopping saying the basmala, stopping and then starting the surah. وصل الجميع, that is joining all 3 with each other. And the way is seeking refuge, saying the basmala and starting the surah all in one breath without stopping. وصل البسملة بالسورة, which is joining the basmala and the beginning of the surah. This means seeking refuge, then stopping, then saying the basmala and the beginning of the surah in one breath. Now the last term that we have, that is وصل الاستعاذة البسملة. That means joining seeking refuge with the basmala. And the way is seeking of refuge and the basmala are joined with one breath. Then the reader stops, then starts the surah. Now we have to learn rules of basmala between surahs or chapters. Hafs, the reader whose way of reading we are studying, according to him, always read the basmala between 2 chapters, suratain, when reading the Quran, except between the chapter Al-Anfal and the Tawbah. There are 4 ways of finishing one surah and continuing to the next. 3 of them are allowed and 1 is not allowed. Now the terms are قطع الكل, وصل الكل, وصل البسملة بأول السورة, الوجه الذي لا يجوز. Now translation of these terms. Separating all of them, joining all of them, joining the basmala to the first verse of surah, the way that is not allowed. Now let's start from the first term, which is قطع الكل, separating all of them. The reader finishes the surah, then stops and takes a breath, reads the basmala, stops and takes a breath, then reads the beginning of the next surah as in the following example. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس. Now the second term, وصل الكل, joining all of them. The reader ends the surah joining the last word with the appropriate vowels with the basmala. Continuing with the same breath, the reader then joins the basmala with the beginning of the next chapter, as in وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Now we have وصل البسملة بأول السورة. In this way, the reader finishes the last verse of the surah, stops and takes a breath, then reads the basmala joining it with the corresponding vowels in the same breath with the beginning of the next surah, as in وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس. Now the last term, الوجه الذي لا يجوز, which is the way that is not allowed. Here the reader would join the end of the surah with the basmala, then stops and takes a breath, then start reading the next surah. This is incorrect way leads the listener to imagine that the basmala is the last verse of the surah that was just finished. This is not allowed. As in وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس. هذا ما عندي والعلم عند الله عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.